All right, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Delayed Offside. It's our All-Star edition. The fans have voted. These are the two representatives of Delayed Offside at the All-Star game. You got me. I'm Sunjay, and I'm joined with
Adam.
Nice to have you. So we're recording this the day after Valentine's Day, and what hockey podcast wouldn't be, complete without talking about romantic comedies. So what's your go-to romantic comedy on Valentine's Day?
Oh geez, well, I was by myself, so let's see. You know what? I like some good old Adam Sandler from back in the day. I'm gonna say The Wedding Singer and 50 First Dates. Get a couple back to back. Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler would be my kind of go-to for Valentine's romantic movies. What about you, Sunjay?
I have a ton of movies, as you can see behind me. If I had to pick one, there's so many. Adam Sandler, Wedding Singer, so good. I like Moonstruck. Moonstruck with Cher and Nicolas Cage. That's a good one. So if you haven't checked that one out, give it a go. Go. Yeah. So enough talking about romantic comedies. Let's get into the hockey stuff.
Deadly. Let's do it. Let's jump
right. All right. So keeping with the theme of Valentine's Day, we talked
Oh my God, I lost you.
About romantic comedies that we love. Let's talk about, McDavid, Iginla, Lemieux, everyone loves, right? Like that's just an easy answer. And so let's choose some players that are a little bit more, a little bit less popular, that only like your fan base would really understand. So I'll let you think of it. So I'll give you my answer.
What's the question again? Sorry, it glitched out a bit and then you.
Sorry about that. So the question is, give me one player from your team that only your fan base would understand, like that has this love for them, kind of like a hidden gem. Or
so easy, easy.
Okay. So I think you got one. You're chomping at the bit. I'll let you go first. So who is it, Adam?
I'm going to tell you that like Oilers Twitter goes absolutely batshit crazy for Jesse Puljujarvi.
Jesse
Puljujarvi is like Twitter Nation's love. And it's actually mind-boggling because like he doesn't produce much in terms of like assists or goals at all. He's had to kind of refine his game. He started hitting because he's like struggling so much. He's one of those guys that you're like, okay, he needs a scene change. But my God, does Oilers Twitter, like they're not utilizing him properly. He could be a legend. Put him with David. He's only had a couple games. Like the wrong move would be to get rid of JP. Like, unreal. I've never seen this before in terms of like loving a certain player and like living and dying by it. So it would be Jesse Puljujarvi.
That's a good one. I do think, outside of the ice, he seems like a good guy. He seems like he's funny. I saw his Halloween costume. I had to laugh. He gives a good effort. Like he's not one of those players that isn't putting in effort. I know the points aren't there, but I could see why he'd be beloved, right? Like he was picked, 5th overall, 4th overall.
Yeah.
And
fourth,
he's been trying. Right? Yeah. He's been trying. It just hasn't worked out yet, but we'll put a pin in that because maybe the Puljujarvi conversation will come back around. For me, I'm going to go a little bit more old school. I don't even know if this is old school, but I guess it's 20 years ago. But I'm going with Fred Brathwaite. So Flames fans love Freddie B. Fred Brathwaite, and I'll tell you why. The season the Flames were having when he first started, we had gone through like 7 or 8 goalies. We set the NHL record, and we had the men's like national team up in Calgary back when they had a national team. And we were so desperate that we called up Fred Brathwaite, and we were playing the Dallas Stars, and they were cup contenders, and the Flames were not. Like we were nowhere near playoff level, let alone cup contenders.
Yeah.
Brathwaite comes in, stones the Stars, and the Flames win 1-0, and a legend was born. Fred Brathwaite is a Flames legend. If he went into the Saddle Dome tomorrow, he would not have to buy a single beer. His seats would be comped. And he only played like 2 years here, never made the playoffs, but he made a lot of beauty saves, and he was a battler, and I just love that guy. So Fred Brathwaite would be definitely my like Flames, unsung hero or hidden
Sweet.
gem in franchise. And he did play a little bit for the Oilers too. Funny
Yes,
enough.
that's
So
right. That's right.
yeah. So I know we talked about Jesse Puljujarvi, and the thing heating up on Twitter right now and around the hockey world is this crazy, that seems like a crazy notion, not even like 3 weeks ago, but there is legitimate talk between the Edmonton Oilers and the San Jose Sharks to send Erik Karlsson to the Edmonton Oilers. Now, as an Oilers fan, I got to know, like, how excited are you hearing these rumors? This is huge. This could change everything. Like, give me your thoughts. First off, do you want to see the move? And yeah, let's hear it.
I'm going to be completely honest. I would love to see this move. I know maybe he's not the greatest defensively, but this is an elite offensive defenseman that is guaranteed to bring you offensive prowess. The power play, although it's quarterbacked by Tyson Barrie, and he's done a great job and had a great year so far this year, would, I think, be even more explosive, because I think Karlsson's got this eye for offense, an unbelievable skill set in passing as well as shooting. He creates so much, and we saw him play with Draisaitl and McDavid at the All-Star game in 3-on-3, and it's like, oh God, there's a good chemistry there. I would love to see him in Edmonton. Now, I know there's been talk about Gavrikov and Chychrun, and those that has mostly all petered out and died. Good, because I'm tired of getting these like kind of second tier, no offense to them, but defensemen. And I'm saying that for Chychrun too, because honestly, I haven't seen much of his work. I know he's good, great. He's in the NHL, but
Yeah.
but like what does he bring in terms of experience that Karlsson brings? He's taken his team to the Stanley Cup. Has he not taken the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup? Was that not a Stanley Cup run?
It was close. Like, it was the Eastern Final, Game 7.
Yes, there we go. Game 7, Eastern Cup Final. Yes, I knew you were a blank, an old school like Ottawa fan as your second team.
Yeah.
So like you could tell too, and there were those moments he was yelling on the bench at players. He wants to win. He brings that passion. He brings that leadership. He brings like just an elite personality and athlete to that team. Now, for 4 years with the cap hit and how they're going to have to try to juggle that kind of boggles my mind. But if they do it, I'm all in for that. Look what the Oilers did when they got Pronger. That's an elite defenseman. Now, Karlsson's not as hard as Pronger, but he brings different pieces to his game that, make him elite. So I'm excited to see if that pans out.
So does anything concern you, like talking about injury history? You know, the last couple of years, San Jose Sharks have not performed well, and he's a big reason for that. But this year, he's back to his Hall of Fame self. Like, this year, he is playing insane. So, like, are you a little bit weary that this may be just a blip? They have no pressure this year coming into the season, and he has performed beautifully. Like, there's no denying he's had a great year. But the last couple of years have not, coming into the season, that was seen as like a really bad contract, and no one wanted to take it on. Now that he's had like 60 good games, 50 good games, is that enough to like quell all your fears, or would you still have a little trepidation making that move?
The only trepidation I run into myself when thinking about this is the injury bug. The injury bug for Karlsson, because that seemed to be a thing throughout his career, constantly injured. He was a Band-Aid. But in terms of his production over the last couple of years with the San Jose Sharks, we also got to remember that, who was their number one D-man? It was Brent Burns. Who quarterbacked the power play? It was Brent Burns. So he had to take a kind of a back seat to that. And that, I think, suppressed some of his ability to perform at that elite level and produce at that elite level because he had to take that back seat. So I think now that he is that number one defenseman, offensive defenseman, he's got that ability to run with it. And I think he's more comfortable with that. And we saw that in Ottawa as well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we know the price 11 million isn't going to be cheap, but also what do you have to give up to get a Hall of Fame defenseman? And, I've heard stuff like Tyson Berry's name. I've heard multiple first round picks. I've heard their first rounder last year. So let's talk about the price here. Cause he's going to be 11.5 million so far. Like that's what his salary is. But not just that. Let's talk about what you have to give up if you're the Oilers to get a Hall of Fame defenseman with the offensive abilities and the year that Karlsson is having. So I've heard names like Tyson Berry. I've heard Evan Bouchard, Jesse Puljujarvi, who we mentioned earlier, Lee Fogel. Who else do we have on Edmonton? Their first round pick, multiple first round picks, maybe Nugent Hopkins, possibly. Like realistically, you aren't going to get him for just future considerations. A considerable amount of assets are going to have to go back to San Jose to make this work for them to entice him, because like they have no rush to get rid of Karlsson. He's still signed for 4 years. So if it doesn't happen this year, that's okay. We'll do it in the offseason or we'll do it next year. They're under no pressure, or, they don't have to do this. So all the pressure is on Edmonton, and they got to make this worth San Jose's while, because this is a franchise altering deal for the Sharks. So give me a realistic expectation of what San Jose fans can expect to get from Edmonton, because it's not just going to be future considerations and a third round pick. Like it's going to be a nice package.
Yeah, let's start it here. You're throwing in a first. You're throwing in a 2023 draft first pick. Right. I think you're throwing in a Tyson Berry.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I think you have to. Right.
That's massive, because he's played really well for you guys this year.
Yeah, which ramps up his price, so that might be a good, you might be able to knock off maybe a prospect with that. And then maybe you're tossing in like I know they want like some sort of prospect like Borgolt, or like a Lavoie in the minors, or perhaps like, I don't know, maybe something like a Jesse Puljujarvi, Warren Fogle. But I think you'd have to bolster that package with one of those D-men, and you're not getting rid of Nurse.
Nope.
No, I don't think you're getting rid of CC. He plays well with Nurse. Kulak, I think, would be a really good fit with Karlsson, because he's been with Barry, two similar like players. And then I don't think you really want to get rid of either Bouchard or Broberg, but those two might be in the package too. One of those two.
You see, if I'm San Jose, as good as Tyson Berry's performed, if you're making this deal, you're tanking hard for Bedard, right? Like that's the whole thing. So if you're San Jose, even if you get Tyson Berry, you could just flip him and get someone else, right? Like another playoff team would love to have a Tyson Berry on their roster. So, if they get him, it'll just be like a cup of coffee. Don't even pick up your jersey. We'll be sending you on your way. Or maybe they'll go for kind of their younger players, like is it Evan Bouchard, who's that young defenseman that's playing really well for them. So it's going to be a big price. But if you get a chance to win the Stanley Cup, and I think if they make this move, they become the favorites to win the West. I still don't know if they have what it takes to beat Boston or Tampa Bay or even Toronto. Sorry.
Oh God. Oh.
Even I know I didn't want to say it,
God. But I see, and that's where I disagree. I do think they have it. Their depth scoring has shown up. They seem to love playing that 11-7 system, of 11 forwards, 7 defensemen. I think that once McDavid and Draisaitl get into the playoffs, we saw what they were capable of last year, and they are unstoppable. They created Avalanche had to win games 5-4, 6-5. Like there's no easy win against the Oilers in the playoffs. And our goaltenders have started playing. We've gotten better goaltending. We got Skinner, we got Campbell, who's found his game. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult this year, especially after last year's first round, or after last year's run.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely think like if you look at the West, Colorado's weaker, losing Kadri, and Makar's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. Dallas looks better. They would be a tough out. I mean, Ottinger, we've seen what he can do in a playoff series. He literally, did everything in his power to win that series, and it took to Game 7 overtime for the Flames to win. So it'll be tough, but I definitely think if Edmonton makes this move, they're the favorites to win the West. And, Boston's looking really good right now in the East. They're my pick in the East right now, but yeah, so it'd definitely be interesting playoff time. We know Edmonton is probably going to make the playoffs unless catastrophic injury happens to one of their two stars. One team that we don't know going to make the playoffs is the Calgary Flames, who are right now battling with the Minnesota Wild for that last playoff spot.
That's right.
Nashville is kind of in it as well. So if you're Brad Treliving, you lose Gaudreau, Tkachuk, but you think you make it up by gaining Kadri and Huberdeau, and it hasn't quite worked out the way I thought it would, and the way a lot of people thought it would, especially, it's year one, lots of time, but this year definitely has not worked out what I thought or what I hoped. Do you think Calgary should be sellers at the deadline or buyers? And realistically, like, what could Calgary get from their roster? They don't have a ton of players on expiring contracts. I think the only one of any value would be Lucic, and I don't know what kind of value he would have. It would have to be, you'd have to take on quite a bit of salary, like probably half, and you probably wouldn't even get a second, like maybe a third for him is best case scenario. So like, is it even worth it to sell, or would you just sit tight and maybe next year things fall into place again and they have another up year?
That's hard. That's a really difficult question, because I personally, from what I've seen and heard in the media, could a coaching change be on the horizon for next year?
That's possible.
Right. I think that might be like what's going on. Like, you hear rumors of the players going to ownership, talking about how they're not appreciating what Sutter's been doing for them, media wise or in the dressing room. You got to think that that's been a weight on Huberdeau's shoulders. Because I don't think he's a Sutter kind of player. And I think that's where they kind of butt heads. And I think that's why he's struggling. So I don't know. And it seems like that style of play is kind of past its time a little bit, that like lockdown D, because it is like, you need to have a really good goaltender to play that way. And that has not been the case with Calgary. And,
not this year.
You would have thought so with that goaltending tandem, but it just hasn't been. So you have to adjust. But it seems like Sutter's like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly. See, you bring up a lot of good points. Talking about Huberdeau, I know like when Sutter first took over the Flames, like the first time around from San Jose, again, like, didn't have like, it was halfway through the year and he didn't really have like a terrific year, finishing off that year. But the next year is when he tied for the Rocket Richard, and, we all know the 2004 Cup run. And then Gaudreau and Tkachuk during the bubble, when Sutter came in halfway through, they didn't have a great, second half of the year with Sutter, but the next year they were 100-point players. So I'm wondering if there is like a little bit long transition period, and, Huberdeau coming in from the East, maybe it's taking a little bit longer because Florida was a little bit more freewheeling team, a little bit more offensive oriented. Maybe that's why I'm hesitant to like say blow it all up. And the thing too is Markstrom's been hot and cold. Like one year he'll be really bad, and then next year he'll get 9 shutouts and finish second in the Vezina voting. Right. So it's hard to say like blow it up now. And for what? Like, I feel like the Flames are close enough to a playoff. I wouldn't trade any futures. I would protect that first round, protect Dustin Wolf, protect Matthew Coronado, all their like high draft picks and like top prospects. But if you could get a player that maybe like bumps you in and doesn't cost you anything, sure. if you never know once you get in, you never know. Like maybe Markstrom gets hot, or maybe Vladar. Maybe if they play Vladar, he's been playing terrific. I think he's lost one game in his last 14 starts or something like that. Like one game in regulation in his last 14 starts. So
Sounds like Campbell. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could be Campbell, Vladar. And if say Edmonton is leading the division and you're like the second wildcard team and you guys are matched up, maybe then go for it so you can beat Edmonton. Like I really wouldn't want to just like go in and just get slaughtered by Edmonton again. Like if we could do something to maybe help out a little bit, then that would be the only thing I would say give up futures for. But at this point, I would say just stand pat.
Yeah.
There's no point. Like, next year, let's see how it happens. And then you can retool it and you bring in some other players, but I just wouldn't risk it. Like it's just no point this year for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just too risky, especially after the risky moves that were made in the offseason to get Huberdeau, to get Tkachuk out, to get Weegar. Like on paper, that's a good team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. Too risky to kind of start moving everything and blowing it up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if the chance to blow it up was last year, if Florida didn't come in with their offer of Huberdeau and Weegar, I think Flames would have blown it up. Yeah. I think for sure they would have traded Tkachuk for multiple first round picks and then probably finish in the bottom 5 in the league and maybe get Bedard. But hey, they're, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of one team, another team that we think is going to be in the playoffs. Now we have to legally put in a segment about Toronto because it increases our viewership by 50%. And Pilon, we want him to listen to this and have some good feelings listening to this podcast. It's not just the Alberta podcast. So the Maple Leafs, I've heard people talking about maybe they'll be going after Patty Kane, 3-time Stanley Cup winning player. They have a ton of offense, but if you get a chance to bring in a Hall of Fame player, maybe the best American player of all time, maybe. If you have a chance to bring him in to your team to play with Matthews in the playoffs, to get over that hump, to finally win a round, do you think the Leafs are going to do it? And if they do pull the trigger and get Kane, are they now your Eastern favorites to make it out of the East?
Well, let me answer that with another question.
Okay.
Who reigns supreme? Is it Team Canada or Team USA?
Oh, well, I think we all know the answer to that.
Exactly. So, you just bolster your team with a bunch of American all-stars. What's going to happen when you meet, these other Canadian players? I'm just kidding. But you see, you get 2 American superstars in Patrick Kane. And I had to make sure I didn't say Evander Kane. Patrick Kane and Austin Matthews. And I think they would really, really like playing with each other. I think it brings another skill set. I don't know what you'd have to give up to get him, because I don't think that the Leafs would want to give up, a Nylander or a Marner, something that they've really liked and built around. Like that's their core, right? You
wouldn't get rid of one of those players.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with like, would they be willing to deal like a Riley, a Morgan Riley, or
I think if you're Chicago, I think you're thinking picks and prospects at this point. And if you're the Leafs, you're thinking cup run. Like you can't be giving up your best defenseman or one of your best forwards in this deal. Like if Chicago, because Kane's a free agent, so they have to move him this year. So I think the price for Kane is way less than the price for Karlsson, just because Karlsson, you get him for another 3 years after this.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. Like, how much are you willing to pay for an aged Patrick Kane? And I don't think you're going to be getting as much as you nearly would have, 5 years ago from a guy who was electric offensively, still is, but obviously has fallen off, and that's with same thing with Jonathan Taves.
Oh, he's fallen off hard.
Oh man, really hard. So I think if they could get him for like maybe a pick and a prospect,
and
get away with that, and have him on their team. But again, what's happened with Toronto and going after those highly sought after veterans for the offseason? It hasn't really panned out that great for them, right? Who did we have that came in? Foligno. We had
Spezza,
Joe
Thornton, Wayne Simmons. Yeah,
like
the list goes on and on.
And really, it's brought in some like leadership. But is that what they need?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe defense, maybe that might be like where they look, but maybe goaltending. But right. Yeah, but if you get a chance to bring in Patrick Kane and you're not losing anyone off your roster,
do it.
And you really have to win a playoff series this year.
Yeah.
If you're Toronto, if you don't win a playoff series this year, the monkey on your back grows even bigger and bigger. Like it grows to be King Kong, right? So you have to do it this year, or else you're not going to do it with this core. If they don't win a playoff series, they're going to have to blow it up. So do everything in their power to get past Tampa. I think that's who they're matched up against right now would be Tampa.
I think you're right. They're tied with 72 points right now. And
that's tough.
Game in hand.
Well, that's tough, man. Playing Tampa Bay, like 3 times they've won the East in a row, 2 times Stanley Cup champion in the last 3 years in your first round matchup. And yeah, I'd say you do that. Even if you overpay, let's say you give up 2 firsts and, a top prospect, I say you do it.
Yeah.
This chance may never come again, right? Like who knows how many more years Nylander, Matthews are all going to be there and other players. So, I think you do it if you're Toronto. You have to.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And if you don't, you're losing your GM, you're losing, your coach might get fired and players are going to want to go elsewhere. And that's when it becomes another, kind of decade of darkness rebuilding. Like, no
one wants that. No fan base wants that, right? Like it's easy to say like keep your picks and prospects, but when you're this close, like I honestly feel like they're just like they're like over the edge. Like if they could just get past the first round, I think they'd have to play Boston in the second round, so that'll be tough. But I honestly think if they can get past the first round, they'll go on a nice deep run because it'll just like everyone will just be like a little bit more relaxed, right? Like the pressure wouldn't be off, but the pressure would be less. Like it's kind of like something with pressure, and then you release the pressure. That's a terrible analogy, but
something with pressure and you release the pressure.
It's like a valve, one of those like things. Yeah. You could tell I'm not an engineer, so
it's like a dam.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Right? Yes,
and then it bursts. And
that's right. Thank you.
Exactly.
So quickly before we sign off here, you mentioned Jonathan Toews and how he's fallen off hard. Like, this guy was, they were building his plaque in the Hall of Fame 5 years ago. Multiple Olympic gold medals, captained his team to 3 Stanley Cups, putting up points. Like, what happened to Toews? He's not even like a player that if I'm going for like a cup run, I don't even know if you consider taking him. Like he's like a negative value at this point.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I think like he's got to look for a diminished role on a team in a leadership kind of position in kind of like a 4th or 3rd line center. I think the game is starting to kind of pass his style by. He is that 2-way, hard-nosed centerman, and I think the game's just gotten a little faster than it was. And we've seen it with other players, right? We've seen it with Joe Thornton. We've seen it with Jaromir Jagr. We've seen it with, we're seeing it with Toews. We're seeing it with like guys that just are having a real hell of a time keeping up. We saw it with Mike Richards.
Yeah, that's another one I was going to say. Mike Richards and Danny Heatley. Yeah,
like the game just got, it used to be a slow game where they could take their time, set up, but like I think maybe it's the pace and, the style has changed. It's more run and gun. Whereas, it's more, that was more positional, more fight for your space, for more, dogging to get those goals, which was a struggle for teams. And now that's not the case. And I think that's the struggle for Taves. But like, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but
do you think like him winning the Stanley Cup so many times early in his career, he never really has that like hunger to win anymore, right? Like maybe he does.
Right.
Like I don't know him personally, but like if you're a player that's never won it before and you're like in your 30s, you're like, shit, I'm going to do everything I can to go in and like keep winning and being the best player. Which Taves has already done it all. You know, like we mentioned, the Stanley Cups, Olympic gold, like 2010, those Olympics, he was part of the reason why we won. Like he was a major reason. He was on that third line, the game against the Russians where we crushed them. He was matched up against KHL players and he just destroyed them. And like Canada just steamrolled the Russians. And Taves was one of the biggest reasons why.
Yeah.
Do you think like him not, you know, he's climbed the mountain. Do you think like retirement's possible after this? Like, I know he's still quite young. He's maybe 32, 33.
I think he's 34.
34. Okay. So, I mean, he's younger than me. So he's still a young guy. Do you think he'll retire after this? And if he does he make the Hall of Fame in your opinion?
I don't think he retires after this year. I think maybe he gives another team or two a shot for a couple of years. But you know, is there a question whether he makes the Hall of Fame? I think you're crazy if you don't think he does. 3-time Stanley Cup champion, multiple gold medals. Like he's done so much for hockey, and he was the face of hockey for quite some time, right? Along with like a Crosby and Patrick Kane and Malkin back in that kind of era, and Ovechkin. Yeah, no, that guy has got like the red carpets laid out already for him to walk in.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Like, even though he's kind of fallen off a little bit in the past, what he did in his prime, he was the most complete player in the NHL. You mentioned like Crosby, Ovechkin, but like they were really good. Like, you know, not taking anything away from those guys because they're Hall of Fame, top 10 players of all time. But Taves was like that rare player that could score, that could kill penalties, play defense. He could play on the power play. He was the player you want out on the ice with 30 seconds left, protecting a 1-goal lead. Or if you're down 1 goal, you want him on the ice with 30 seconds left. Like he was like the complete player back in his prime with Chicago. So yeah, it seems like the Blackhawks, a lot of those players have really like fallen, like Kane, we mentioned, Taves, Seabrook, even though he did have a good year last year with Edmonton.
That's it.
No, that was Keith. That was Keith.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Like of that team, and I know we're getting like off topic a bit, but like of that team, who's gonna hit the Hall of Fame? It's gonna be Taves, gonna be Kane, gonna be Keith, Seabrook's gonna be in there, and arguably Patrick Sharp.
Oh, I don't know about Sharp. Sharp in the Hall of Fame. That might be a stretch for me.
I don't know. I think he might. Like that'd be a good debate.
You think Patrick Sharp? Like, does he even have like 500 points? Like that's, I don't know. I know he won cups, but I mean, like role players. I mean, unless you're part of like the Oilers have a bunch of role players, like Kevin Lowe's in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Because he won so many cups, but like, he was an important part of those teams, so it's not unheard of. But like, would you ever say if you were a GM in the league in the last 20 years, would you ever say Patrick Sharp was a top 30 player in the league?
Oh, in some of those seasons, maybe. I think he had injury trouble too, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Patrick Sharp is an interesting one. I don't see it though. Unfortunately, for me, that would be a no.
But those other four.
But those other four, I would say yes. Yeah.
And then who else was like that? Was virtually the core.
Well, right? I mean, Hosa's in there now.
Oh, right? Hosa, that's the other glaringly obvious one. Yeah, because then you wouldn't say like Shillington. Is that who it was? No, not Shillington. Who is it? The
defenseman.
Yes. Chalmerson.
Yes, him. He was a good player.
Yeah, good player, but again, probably not Hall of Fame caliber kind of guy, right?
No, but I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe in 20 years, we're having this discussion about some of the Edmonton Oilers. Like if they get Karlsson and everything goes as planned for you guys, as nightmare for me. But if Edmonton wins, puts a little bit more hardware up north. we might be having this conversation about Nugent Hopkins or
Right.
I don't even know who else, but I mean, definitely there's
Well, you might
already
be
two.
having, it could be Hyman.
Yeah, right. Like he could be their like Hossa or their Patrick Sharp, right? Like
Exactly.
Hyman could be that guy. Nugent Hopkins again. That's what made Chicago so successful is they had those Kane and Taves, but their like other roster was filled with like players that you didn't want to play against, and they made your life, like they were like really like hard on you, and like they like scored and they were so clutch. So it'll be interesting to see. Like you need those players, and I think Edmonton has some of those players, but they're at risk a little bit if they get rid of some of those players to get Karlsson.
Yeah,
they kind of gut the team. But anytime you get a chance to bring in Erik Karlsson, you have to do it, unless the price involves McDavid and Draisaitl, which obviously Edmonton would just hang up the phone. But if no matter who else, what if they wanted Nugent Hopkins? Let's say, would you be ready to get rid of him?
I think if you got rid of Nugent Hopkins now, the season he's having compared to the season that Karlsson's having, it's very much they're very similar. They're putting up the same amount of points. I think that brings down the amount that you would have to give up for Karlsson.
What if it was Nugent Hopkins and a first round pick? Straight up, that's it. And a prospect. We'll say and a prospect. So those three pieces. So you keep Puljujarvi, you keep Fogle, you keep some of your other players. Like,
that's tough.
That's tough. But a chance to get Karlsson.
Yeah,
I mean, Nugent Hopkins is one of those lifer, right? Like he's been with Edmonton through ups and downs.
Yeah, keep Nuge forever is on t-shirts, right?
I mean, his jersey might be hanging up from Rogers Arena one day.
Yep. Yeah, it's
probably.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point. I don't even know if you'd send a first if you sent Nuge, right?
Yeah, and then if you're San Jose, would you flip? You could flip them.
Yep.
And get a ton for him, right? So,
good question.
Yeah, I mean, we had a good conversation today. Thanks for joining us in the All-Star edition. Maybe next year, Pilon and Barron can get more fan voting, get more support, and then they can join us in the All-Star edition.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone for joining us for Delayed Offside. I'm Sunjay.
I'm Adam, and please like, subscribe, join the comments in the bottom.
That's right. Until next week.
This has been Delayed Offside.